Good evening, everyone out there, and thank you very much for joining us tonight on the Bloody Scotland Book Club. My name's Lin Anderson, and I'm your host for tonight. We have three excellent books for discussion this evening. So let's now introduce our panel. You can see them all up there. You've probably met them before, possibly on one of these book clubs, or maybe at Bloody Scotland itself. They're all experts on and enthusiasts of the crime genre. And they chose, of course, tonight's selection. That's one job I don't have to do. It's great. So first up is Sharon Bairden. Sharon's a veteran crime book blogger at Chapter in My Life. I suggest you go and visit that. She's also a crime novelist. And Sharon's debut novel, Sins of the Father, was published November 2020. I remember reading it and loving it, followed by You Need Me in 2021. And her third novel, The Lies That Bind, is currently seeking a home. So there might be someone out there that can supply that home. Then Jonathan Whitelaw up next. Jonathan is an award-winning author, journalist, and broadcaster, and he is coming to us from far away this evening, right
so
across
far
the
away, it's only the
Atlantic.
afternoon. Yeah, I'm back in time.
In fact, so far away, his time went out, and he was ready for this an hour ago. But fortunately, he is with us. His latest book is The Concert Hall Killer. Our third panel member is A.J. Hawley, Alex to us, author of Two Writers, One Story, and a regular panelist and judge for Bloody Scotland. And thank you to them all for coming on tonight and for choosing your books.
No problem. Love it. Love doing
it. Good. We're going to start off with Sarah Hilary's Thorn. And we'll get a little video of a reading with that, after which Sharon will chat about it.
Hello, I'm Sarah Hilary, and I'm going to be reading from my new book, Thorn. It was after dark before the thunder came, rolling in off the sea like all the weather here. The storm mustered at the horizon, steel-coloured clouds giving way to a sunset like distant forest fires. The heat was unbearable, pushing at everything and everyone. Christy would not stop moving, pacing from room to room, his phone case sweating in his hand. Agnes offered to bring him a cold can from the fridge, but he said the ice maker had packed up. He kicked the wall as he said it, as if he hated the house now. Their mother was in the sitting room listening to a podcast on her phone. Dad was in the garden folding away the loungers in case of storm damage. The storm was needed, that's how it felt, to break the bad mood that had descended on the street since the party. The last of the balloon arch sagged and dragged in the dead air. Agnes lay on her bed, sweat crawling from her temples, watching the sky through her window. The first split of thunder sounded like an axe through wood. All her attention was on the sky, the treetops where the storm was pressing. Another axe blow opened a seam of white in the darkness. Lightning. She went to the window, put her palm to the glass. The house was trembling as if heavy traffic was passing at a distance. 2 fat splats of rain hit the window. Then nothing. Silence. A stirring in the trees, the sharp shape of a bird flying from its branches, away. Thunder rolling on and on into silence again. The glass shuddered against her skin. Wind roared through the gardens, clattering furniture. Deep in blackthorn ashes, glass shattered, high and shrill. Voices shouted in alarm, lights coming on in the houses, banging in the blackness like searchlights. A gull crazed across the sky, crying. Agnes could smell her brother's skin and sweat. The sky was sulphurous, wind whipping the scent of the sea into the house. Shit! Christy pointed towards the garden 2 houses from theirs. Blurred by the rain, it looked like a spaceship trying to take off. Black body, silver fins, A trampoline tugged by the wind, turning somersaults as it hit the hedge and went over, away. More people began shouting as the lights went dead. Power cut. The darkness only lasted a moment before lightning cracked, dazzling all the windows into brightness. At her side, Christie flinched. She offered her hand and he took it, gripping tight. Crashing from the gardens as furniture and potted plants blew over and broke. Car alarms shrieking, and people too. Over it all, the endless percussion of the rain beating down. Agnes was the first to hear the ambulance. Its siren a reedy note under the drumming of the storm, coming from the other end of Blackthorn Ashes, where the new tarmac drive met the old road, Ashes Road, that ran into town.
I felt like thanking Sarah for that, but of course it's pre-recorded. But wonderful to hear an author read their own work like that, isn't it?
And I
fantastic.
think that reading really just hit home to me how intense that book really is. I'll start off with a wee sort of overview of Blackthorn. So, and I'll need to remember it's Agnes and not Agnes. So I'll need to keep the Glasgow mammy out of me, out of my voice.
You will indeed.
So Blackthorn Ashes was meant to be their forever home. The first 6 families who moved into the exclusive new development on the cliffs overlooking the Cornish Sea thought they'd found their paradise. How wrong they were. 6 weeks later, and 6 people were dead, and Blackthorn Ashes abandoned, hiding a dark secret. Agnes Gale, daughter of one of the developers and one of the surviving residents, is determined to find out the truth of what happened. And I think if I was to sum this up, this book blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind from page 1. That opening chapter, I remember reading it and I think, never has a delivery driver's journey felt so menacing.
Yes, I remember that.
It was just the whole chapter, to me, it was a riot of colours, smells, tastes, all the senses. There was just a huge explosion of them. It almost felt like a sensory overload at times, which was really interesting given that Agnes is neurodivergent. So that sort of link was made for me quite early on. I really enjoyed the style. It was told in the sort of the before the abandonment and after the abandonment. And I know that sometimes that, that sort of flipping back and forth between timelines can be confusing, but I felt it really worked well. I thought Sarah just executed it perfectly. It just allowed the story, the whole disturbing underlying story just to be revealed almost in a sort of teasing way. So it really, really worked well for this book. And again, I think if you've read any of Sarah's sort of standalones, you know that she's got a real sort of gothic style about her writing, and I think that was certainly the case in Blackthorn. It was really, really sinister. That sort of gothic undertone throughout the story. It's something that Sarah really does excel at. And when I was reading it, it was one of those books I didn't want to put down, but I wanted to put it down because I wanted to last way longer than it did. But you were kind of reading it feeling almost off kilter, unsettled while I was reading it. That sort of eerie, like, oh, I don't feel quite right while I'm reading this. And I think listening to Sarah reading there and talking about the storm, I think that sort of feeling was amplified by the whole sort of sense of place, the setting, the storm, that idea that Blackthorn Ashes was an idyllic place, but it was what was going on there was absolutely terrifying. I think it gave that sort of gradual feeling of building suspense. some people might call it a slow burn, and I know a lot of reviewers and book reviews will criticize books for being slow burns. I think slow burn works really, really well in psychological thrillers. I think it really does build that tension and that suspense, and I think that's what happened there. It's a character-driven novel, and she's crafted, perfect characters, placing the reader firmly within those characters' lives. Every single one of them sort of jumped off the page, from her dad, Adrian, and that suffocating depression that he felt, Christie's simmering rage and anger and resentment at his sister, and for the difference of Agnes, you could really feel his resentment at, the things that Agnes could sense that were wrong, that she could feel, taste, and sense that were wrong, even if you couldn't see them. And then her mum, that sort of relationship between Agnes and her mum. And I sort of struggled because, I really disliked her mum at parts throughout the book, but as the story developed, without giving any spoilers away, I began to understand that relationship a wee bit more. But I think for me, Agnes stole the show for me. She's probably the most authentic neurodiverse character that I've ever read. And seeing the world through her eyes really places you inside her head. And it gives, for me, I think it gives a real authentic understanding of what it means to be neurodiverse, to have autism or Asperger's. There's one scene I remember that there was lots of different scenes, but there's one scene where she struggles while she's making a sandwich, and she's struggling to think of the different steps that she needs to take to create this sandwich, and that caused her to become really, really overwhelmed, and have to seek that solace and seek quiet space. And I think that gave a really true picture of what it means, for people, who live with that experience. And I think for me, I would say if anybody was struggling to understand what autism neurodivergence means, then I would tell them to read this book to get a really true picture of it. And I know it's a crime fiction book, and the crime was there, but I think for me, this book was about the characters, and really being entrenched in their lives throughout. What can you say? It's Sarah Hilary. It was exquisite. The writing was exquisite. It's suspenseful. It's thought-provoking, and it got right under my skin. And it's still there. I can picture Blackthorn Ashes in my head, and thank goodness I don't live there. That's all.
I was about to say you don't want to move there, though.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Alex, would you like to tell us how you got on with it?
I must admit, I really did enjoy it when I got my head around the lack of the traditional chapter structure doesn't always work well on audio. Once I got my head around it, as Sharon says, the first chapter is so impactful. I actually reread that 3 times to get myself back into the flow of the book, because it's a completely different style to what Sarah Nolly writes in, and the themes of the book are so original. I mean, you've got like corporate manslaughter and all sorts of different things that you don't normally get in crime fiction. It's not your traditional crime fiction book at all. And then when you look at the way that the challenge that autism dealt with as well, and the number of different angles that comes from, just really good. And I just, although I knew generally what it was going to be about, because I heard Sarah talk about it before reading it, but it was a really nice surprise to get a whole new flavour behind what Sarah's writing, because I'd read the previous one, and the standalones are completely different to a series. So yeah, it's gives you a whole new side to her writing. I wouldn't say it was a slow burn at all, because you know what happened from page one, so not really a slow burn. And you know, it works from it just works.
Yeah, it's sort of a wonderful setup, and then from it's you have to start trying to work out what's really led them to that point, which is fascinating. Jonathan?
Yeah, I completely agree with the others. I am slightly nervous because I understand that Sarah is watching live right now,
I know.
and now I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I meant to say that's going to top that? Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I'm not just saying that because Sarah's watching, obviously, but yeah, I really enjoyed it. I really like I love the language. I love the language that's throughout the book. I've got a whole page of notes here. But there's the scene right at the start of chapter 2 between Agnes and Christie, and they're watching the rain fall outside the window, and they're talking about the duck boards being stolen the last time there was heavy rain. And there's this wonderful imagery, and I've got it written down here. It's watching the mouth and eyes run wetly of the smiley face that's been drawn on the window. And I couldn't shake that. I still can't shake it. I'm talking about it just now, and the whole book is loaded with this type of stuff, and yeah, it was a real pleasure to read. I for my sins, I haven't read any of Sarah's beforehand, but it's absolutely on my radar now. But yeah, really enjoyed it. Also a great crime story as well at its heart. Obviously, as the guys have said before, there's a lot going on here, and it's managed really well. But there's a kind of juicy whodunit at the center of it as well, and that's what we all want from crime fiction too. And yeah, it's interesting. I always felt like it's difficult. It's difficult when places like the Cornish coast, or as we're about to go on to Brighton and the North Sea, and then obviously up in Scotland. So we're going to find out in Wester Ross with our third book. It's always difficult to try and put your own spin as an author on these such well-known places. And I'll be honest, and again, I'm not just saying this because Sarah's watching live, but I've never felt more immersed in that setting than I did in this. And I think that's a very special and unique ability to do as a writer, and it is executed with aplomb here. Yeah. Sorry, Sarah, if you don't like me saying things like that, but it's true.
It was such a visual read, though, wasn't it?
It is.
Yeah. I forgot about the raindrops thing, but everything,
Yeah.
and even imagining our dad in that caravan sinking into this deep depression, and just that feeling of claustrophobia that you got when you were in there. I just, as you said, Jonathan, I think I just was like completely immersed in that book.
Did you think, I mean, what struck me, you're talking about the caravan, anybody trying to live in a caravan in a heat wave, and the heat wave in it is a character in itself. I mean, and it's like they were living in hell, an inferno of heat. With everything. So I loved what you said, Jonathan, about the location, because I've never been to Cornwall, but I feel I have now.
Yeah.
But I'm not buying a house down there on a
not
cliff
a brand new
top
estate.
in a gated community.
That's the thing, Lynn, right? That's the thing about it, is that it's so hard to do, right? And we're all veterans of crime writing, and we're all avid readers, and the classic one is the place becomes a character in literature, especially crime fiction. But it felt so much more than just a character. You were completely, and exactly as you say there, the heat wave in a caravan, and yeah, it's just, again, so immersive, which is I mean, it's disgustingly well done, which makes you sick,
Oh well, yeah. I think we all agree. We all agree now on that. So shall we move on to Brighton Rock? And obviously we don't have well, not obviously, but we don't have a reading for Brighton Rock, but we're going to see a little bit of the film before Jonathan talks to us about that. Gosh.
Ooh.
One look at Pinky and I'm terrified. Okay, Jonathan, how did you get on then?
Yeah, certainly. So for those of you unfamiliar with Graham Greene's Brighton Rock, here's a very, very short blurb. A gang war's raging through the dark underworld of Brighton. 17-year-old Pinky, malign and ruthless, has killed a man. Believing he can escape retribution, he is unprepared for the courageous, life-embracing Ida Arnold. Now, that's a very, 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 very brief, very broad-stroked look at what Brighton Rock is. Interestingly, we were talking before we came on air there, weren't we, guys, that I really, really struggled to separate the Pinky from the novel with the late, great Sir Richard Attenborough's portrayal there, and I'm a little bit more relieved that we don't have Messrs. Attenborough and Greene in the audience this evening for very, very good reasons. But yeah, it's an interesting novel. It wasn't something. It was my suggestion, and it's one of those books that I think has just been perennially in my life that I've never ever actually gotten around to properly sitting down and reading, with a critical eye for the purposes of something like this. And I do remember seeing that movie adaptation when I was quite young, actually. I think it's one of those films that is so old that it would have been put on Channel 4 at 2:00 in the afternoon in the summer holidays, and I've always gotten that impression with something like Brighton Rock. It is part of our lives, particularly as readers, particularly as crime fiction readers, but it's, perhaps, it's always on the to be read pile and you never quite get to it. So again, delighted to have read it now. One of my big observations for it is obviously just coming off of Blackthorn by Sarah Hilary is the kind of eloquence of language from Graham Greene. It's widely considered, the book is widely considered as a sort of landmark moment where Graham Greene starts moving towards quite spiritual themes and the role in this book, the role of sort of fidelity of the main character Pinky, and he befriends he seduces a young waitress, Rose, who witnesses a murder, and he uses or is aware of the kind of gang shenanigans or what have you that's going on, and he coerces her and convinces her that they are a couple and they're due to be, they will be wed, and he does all this, of course, just to try and save his own hide. He's an utterly despicable character, and he's despicable from near enough page 1 all the way through right to the end. Again, I won't go into spoilers here. And it's quite literally the end of the novel. He's utterly despicable, and I think that sort of characterization and the way that Graham Greene crafts this character of Pinky, there's a reason that we're still talking about it. I think it was 1938. I think the movie came out. So the guts of a century. We're still talking about this book, and we're still talking about this character in particular. And going back to what I was talking about, language there. I've got it written down. I've got a kind of quote from I think it's the first paragraph. The beautiful language that's used to describe Pinky in particular, this absolutely awful character. He comes into the bar and he's described as wearing a shabby smart suit, the cloth too thin for much wear, a face of starved intensity, a kind of hideous, unnatural pride. And what a piece of language! What a way to introduce a character, not just a villain, right, and not just the villain, but any character. A beautiful description of someone who is utterly awful, and of course that's the remaining theme. Of course, Brighton Rock. The theme of it is that the piece of rock has Brighton Rock written all the way through it, and a character like Pinky is rotten to the core and will never ever change, and subsequently never does change. And it deals with all the kind of fallout and stuff like that of all the characters that unfortunately find themselves drawn into his world and of the kind of razor gangs and things like that. Nice to see a very young, although it's very hard to describe him as young, a very young William Hartnell in that clip there. Of course, the very first Doctor Who, but he always looked like an old man. That is the kind of fun part. But I did find, like I said, I did find it very, very difficult to differentiate between the performances in that particular version of Brighton Rock and the novel. But that is absolutely not a commentary on how much I enjoyed the book. Far from it. Actually, it's a compliment to how well it was adapted. I believe Graham Greene was involved in the adaptation actually, because it was on stage. It was on stage before it became a film. But yeah, I loved it. I thought it was great, and really, really good. Like I said, very, very difficult when you're reading it to think that it's 90 something years old, or coming up for that, because it's we do look at things through very, very modern lenses, and it holds up for me.
Thank you, Jonathan. Sharon, do you want to tell us what you thought?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Jonathan said. I don't that the language, and when I was thinking about the books today before I came on, I thought there was a lot of similarities there in terms of it was very character driven as well.
Yeah.
Pinky was pretty psychotic, and didn't do much for promoting religion. I think religion screwed that guy up big time. I think I was kind of left confused about my feelings about this book. I think I said before we come on, there was times when I was reading it, I felt that I should be studying it rather than reading it for enjoyment. But I don't know. I think I would like to go back and read it and take my time again to read it. The opening line, oh my goodness! So you've got to give praise to that opening line. That was just immense. That Hale knew before he'd been in Brighton 3 hours that they meant to murder him. That was just absolutely fantastic. That just drew you right in. It's not a light read. I think it was really dark. I think it was really depressing at times. Whereas Blackthorn was really dark, but I didn't feel the same sort of, I don't know, depression reading it. The violence, there was one scene, was it Pinky and Spicer were at the races and they got attacked, and while it wasn't a graphic scene, I think it felt like the most violent scene that I've ever read. It just left me like shivering. I haven't seen the film at all, so I've got nothing there to compare it to. And I think reading it in 2024 as a female, it was really hard to read Rosie's character as this
Very hard.
needy, this needy woman that had this attachment to this absolutely horrible guy. You were just screaming, "No, what are you doing, woman?" But you have to take your head back and go, this was the 1930s, so it was true to its time. I liked Ida. I thought she brought some light into the darkness, and I liked the way she was used to sort of question some of the morality. I liked Ida. So yeah, I've really enjoyed it. Wee bit confused, and I would like to go back and read it again.
Yeah, you mentioned Ida there, and I thought of Ida as really like the private investigator.
Yeah.
She was the person she was like your policeman.
Yeah.
And she was. What do you think, Alex?
I thought it was actually quite funny that Jonathan mentioned the film clip, because I didn't realise that we're going back to the old one, because what I was thinking of was Helen Mirren's depiction of Ida from the 90s.
Yes, I remember that one.
Yeah, so distinctive, and it made it so much easier to read the audiobook because I got the characters depicted in my head. And because I'd already seen the film, I knew what was coming, even though I'd seen the film ages ago. It made it easy to read, and also, ironically, what Sharon said about studying it, it was also part of the crime writing course I'd just been on. So, yeah, it's the language in it is prime for studying, and absolutely the tension and the darkness. And I don't know whether you should be feeling for Pinky or feeling for anything, empathy for the villain, but I think sometimes good writing makes you do that, doesn't it?
Yeah,
even
I
though
thought that, Alec. At times I was like, although he was horrible, at times I did feel empathy for him somewhere in there, because you think, where did that all come from? You know, was he a product of
yeah,
his environment, or it's that whole nature nurture thing, isn't it?
yeah,
So yeah, that's
Yeah, and it was a, sorry, I was just going to say it's a very Catholic book, you know, the
mm,
whole business of Catholicism and how it affected people's lives, you know, very powerful. Jonathan, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I agree, Lynn. I think it's very much a book of its time, and it's very much a contemporary novel for the 1930s and that whole world. It's written then and it was published then and stuff like that. Just going back to Ida for a second, there's a wonderful line about it, about her as a character, where she's talking about good versus bad, or she's in a conversation talking about good versus bad, and it's mentioned that she doesn't deal with just good and bad. It's good versus evil. It's light versus dark.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger picture. She's the complete antithesis of who Pinky is. She's this shining ray of light in amongst his complete, black hole of darkness. And you're right, Sharon, you make a really good point actually about the kind of background of who Pinky is, and I haven't read it, but I believe that I think it was the book before the book but one before from Graham Greene, that what happens in that novel is essentially what leads to Pinky becoming the leader
right.
of this gang.
Okay.
Not that I think that it's ever sort of explicitly addressed, but there's this kind of element of world building, which of course, when you think about, these days in 2024 and has been for the last 20, 30 years, it's sort of common practice. But to think, 1938, this was going on with someone like Graham Greene, and he's creating these characters and creating this world, like I said, world building is incredible. I mean, one thing I will say about it is kind of going back to saying that it is a novel very much of its time. I don't mind that, but it is a very different world, right? And the kind of language, as lovely as it is to sit and enjoy it in 2024, the kind of language that's used is very I don't want to say historical, but it is historical, right? And even watching that clip, because I think the film came out maybe about 10, 12 years before, 10, 12 years after, I beg your pardon. It looks a little antiquated. The acting's a little wooden. At times it did feel a wee bit disjointed. And again, interesting that you guys say about it's used as a sort of almost like a textbook. It's used as a sort of stand-up piece of work to study. I can completely understand why. I totally get it. And I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it without thinking that part of it. But I think I don't think I ever got the opportunity to read it when I was, like, say, at school or what have you, or it just never came on my radar. So, but I'm aware of, obviously, as a piece of work that it's kind of held up there. But yeah, it's an interesting one. I don't know if I would say I had good fun reading it.
No.
I don't think it's a good fun read, right? I don't think you have good fun
it's,
reading it, right?
it's not a good fun read.
But it feels important to read it, and it feels important, as crime writers today, and as a crime writing collective, and as an appreciation of the genre, it feels that it should be given, it should be glanced at. It's weird, right? Does that make sense? Like I didn't go, oh God, that was great fun. I really enjoyed reading Brighton. I didn't hate it either, right? I did enjoy it.
Yeah. I wondered about the setting, because that whole business of, I mean, obviously I've never been to Brighton, but as a child I would be down in Rothesay, which was mobbed in the summer,
Right.
and it was like a miniature version of these big English seaside towns.
Yeah.
And that world of people enjoying themselves. But it's only right just underneath. It's all been run, everything has been run by these mobsters, and the racing and everything. I found that quite fascinating. I loved what you said about the Brighton Rock, and and the other thing is how young Pinky is. He actually
Yeah, of
doesn't look
course.
that young in that clip. Really, he
Yeah.
looks more in his mid-20s or something like that. But I mean, he is just a teenage boy, in fact.
17, yeah.
17,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah, 17. And Rose is 16, I think.
yeah.
What I recall. Yeah.
The other thing I would just add in, when I was thinking about it, what you have is you have someone from Graham Greene was part of higher society, as it were. you know, and he is writing about people that really he has no experience of. I mean, I doubt if you've ever even walked among such people. And I can't help but think, I was thinking, because of the different, I mean, I don't think that happens now. I think most of us,
Yeah. It's that sort of access, isn't it? I think Lynn's.
I was thinking what we write, we write it to the same extent. Am I wrong? Yeah, we don't really do it. We tend to actually just write people, but not obviously he was having them as lower class people, you know, living in poverty. But he had no, you know, he never mixed, as far as I know, with people in that strata. And, you know, I felt a bit sad because none of them seemed to have any positive attributes about them, you know, except Ida. And she was one. So even the wee girl, Rosie, was that her name? She was just starved of all affection, you know, which is why
And her
although he was
parents as well.
pretending to be nice to her, that it was possibly only the first person
that ever was, because
Yeah,
there was a scene where they go into the house and she talks about her mother being, oh, she's in the mood. It's her
I
mood.
know. I thought
And
that was an amazing scene with the two of them there when he turns up, and that I did.
Yeah.
It was incredible, but
you're right.
quite depressing. I don't know about anybody else, but you know,
there was no endearing qualities about anybody, and I think
when I got to the last page and put it down, I thought, oh, thank God I'm finished reading that.
I'm glad you said that, Lynn.
You're making me feel bad for picking it now, Lynn.
No, I was really glad you did, because I did enjoy it, and I thought that yeah, just like you all, I mean, the words are fantastic.
Yeah,
every word on every page is so beautifully and carefully chosen. But yeah, even the wonderful laughter of Ida and her positivity about life, it didn't save me from that deep dark hole of being with a psycho for all those words. Yeah, definitely a classic though, and I'm so glad. No, I do thank you for choosing it, because I did enjoy
I'm
it.
glad I read it, because I've never read it before. I hadn't seen the film, so thank you for choosing it, Jonathan.
For that reason alone, yeah, I think it was well worth it, and it also is great in the combination of the three books. So we're going to move on now to Unburied by Heather Critchlow, who I should say also was shortlisted for the debut at Bloody Scotland. So we're delighted that this was chosen, and Alex is going to talk to us about it.
Well, we got a clip then, yeah.
Prologue. Wester Ross,
oh, sorry,
Scottish
of course,
Highlands.
my apologies.
Prologue. Wester Ross, Scottish Highlands. Bryony, 2007. Bryony tilts her face to the weak sunlight, trying to catch some warmth to stem the chill snaking through her veins. It's not the worst place to wait, but it is cold, sitting slumped on the doorstep. She lets her fingers fall to the slab of remorseless stone, worn smooth by centuries of farming feet. Her hands are sticky and warm, the blood congealing. Panic stirs inside her. Will someone come? Did they hear the shots? If so, they'll be here soon with their false concern and judgment. Her mind spirals, sending thoughts in loops and swirls. It would have been different if Robbie hadn't wet the bed. They wouldn't have been at home, and this wouldn't have happened. The moment her son slipped shame-faced into their bedroom this morning, gears slid into motion, and darkness smiled. Her fingers closed tight, hands convulsing so that her nails pierced the skin in crescent moons. She was going to be better. She tried, but she failed. Since Robbie was born, she's had something else inside her, an ugliness that lay beneath the surface, undiscovered for so long, rearing up with motherhood. She shuts her eyes for a moment, but the bloody image is imprinted on her brain, the smell in her nostrils. She's let everyone down, her sons most of all. Her breath sounds loud in the quiet.
Today was going to be a good day. They were going to go out. She was going to make an effort and take the boys to the green-watered lochen through the pine trees. She wasn't going to rush or scold them. The bag she packed last night is just inside the doorway. Even with her eyes closed, she can see it. Small swimming shorts and rash vests with dinosaurs on them. A box of Tunnock's tea cakes tucked in beside the good intentions. Sean loves the marshmallow. It was going to be an Enid Blyton-worthy adventure, making memories, the way those Facebook bitches are always on about. She was going to let the boys climb trees, throw stones, get muddy. She was going to be the kind of mother she once had so much faith she would be. The sun slips behind a cloud and she shivers at the sudden cold, can't clutch the wisps of thought that pirouette in her brain. She could tell by the look on Robbie's face that he'd wet the bed again. She didn't need him to confess or to run her hand over the bottom sheet and find the damp patch. Its penetrating odour nestling in the mattress, his room, his skin. She should have been kind, felt what normal mothers feel. The ones who can tuck a baby into the crook of one arm and wipe a kitchen surface with the other hand, all the while smiling like their life isn't the biggest heap of shite around. But she wasn't. She lost her temper. She ripped the sheets from the bed and cancelled their plans. It wasn't that she didn't see the tears in her son's eyes so much as she couldn't feel them. Does she sleep? Her eyes jerk open, and against the greenery and the gravel and the hardness of the doorstep and the carnage in front of her, she sees his eyes, haunting her, blue and staring, shock painted onto them. Robbie, her oldest, her complicated one, the child who deserved so much more. Robbie, she whispers, her lips dry and cracking. I'm sorry, love. And she is. She really, really is.
Oh, I almost missed that. You see, I got too quick off my mark to get to Alex there. That was a wonderful reading. Gosh, it just brought the book all back. Alex.
Yeah, I must admit, in order to prepare for tonight, I reread the first 3 chapters again because it just really brought the characters to life. Same as she did in the first book. Because Heather is very good at having just her books have both got 2 parallel storylines in them, one from the past and one from a podcaster from the present, which makes it a very interesting way of looking at things. And I know that podcasts are now becoming quite popular as a form of how to write crime fiction, because you've got the 6 stories and Matt Wesolowski, and then you got and so many people. I can't remember how many people have done it now, but when it was shortlisted for the first one was shortlisted for the debut prize, and this one, when I was asked to do it for the spring group, it had only been released 3 weeks before, so I thought, how fresh can you make the book, and we'll go for a brand new one. Even though it's the second in the series, it felt as if it was all right to read, because although there was references to the first book, it wasn't overtly. I don't think it got in the way then, because it's mainly about the investigation within the story. I mean, the elements of the first book is why he ended up in the location. Other than that, not really that crucial to the mystery of it. When it's a mum and a kids and feeling isolated location, particularly as a lawyer, you can understand how frustrated she might have been giving up her job to become a mum at home again. It's a bit of a indictment about the way that the modern life is, I suppose, because it's a bit difficult to balance being a mum and in such a stressful job, I imagine. Yeah. And how the characters, how we found out about how stressful her life was, and why she ended up in the position she was in, makes it a really good story with the stress of the podcaster and deciding whether he really should be investigating it because of how is it impacting on people. Yeah, really interesting. I think, Sharon, you were saying you'd not read the first one before, so I was really curious as to what you thought about that.
Yeah, I hadn't read the first one before, but it didn't make any difference to my enjoyment to it, Alex. Sometimes if you go in after the first book, you feel as if you've sort of missed out, but I didn't feel as if I'd missed out. It just made me want to go and now buy book one to read that. So
Yeah, good thing. What about you, Jonathan?
Yeah, listen, I agree with both of you. It's only sort of getting to this stage of the evening where I realise how absolutely atmospheric we all we picked the kind of books for this session. Yeah, I mean, like heartbreaking stuff, heartbreaking stuff, and heartbreaking backstories to the
goodness.
characters and stuff. And there was a line actually that Heather read there, and I had it noted down because I think it's the prologue, and that she read from the prologue, and it's this line here. It's the since Robbie was born, she said something else inside her, an ugliness that lay beneath the surface, undiscovered for so long, rearing up with motherhood. And it's like, you know, that completely sets the tone, right? And that's like 3-4 paragraphs into the prologue. Totally sets the tone for the rest of the novel. And I love that sort of imagery. It's, you know, the sort of classic, not just motherhood but fatherhood as well, obviously, and parenthood in any and all capacity is, you know, of this caring, of this soft edged, of this, you know, empathetic a role that a person would traditionally play towards their offspring. And to have that line, you know, rearing up with motherhood, and you're talking about it's bubbling beneath the surface. And we talked about it obviously with Brighton Rock and how all, you know, this world that's going on beyond what you can see. And for me, the whole book, for me, the whole of Unburied is like that. It's that kind of wonderful exploration of you know, for want of a better expression, spot the former tabloid hack, but it's that exploration of the human condition, right? That's what it is. Plus, again, you've got a really fascinating murder mystery to try and solve throughout the whole of it. And yeah, I did a little bit of looking around. I kind of had a look around just to see what the word on the street was in terms of like people that have enjoyed it and what have you. And you know, the sort of supporting cast as well are so vividly brought to life. You know, there's Chrissy who's Cal's daughter. I saw a wonderful review that described her as having the kindest of hearts. I thought, what a wonderful way to describe that character, because that's the role, right? That's who they are, and in the kind of the overall picture of it. Yeah, I mean, just masterfully executed and a brilliant setting. Obviously, Wester Ross, a wonderful part of the world. Again, you always feel really bad when you say that these places are lovely and you want to go there, but you only discover them through some murder mystery, some horrible crime that's happened on their shores. It's like Shetland, right? Shetland's a beautiful place, but you know, it's forever associated with bodies washing up on the beach and terrible things happening. But it's true, and again, you know, completely brought absolutely to life, and you know, not overly done with the deftest of touches, and that, I think that's, you know, I think that was maybe my favorite part of Unburied, is that balance, you know, that balance of the setting and where it's all happening with that characterization. And Heather does such a masterful job of doing that balancing and never giving one element of it too much that you feel the other part's neglected. And we're all writers, we know how hard that is to do, and it's always lovely to see, and in this case done and seen and done so well.
And I think as well, she brought in that there was a real sense of that small village, small town feeling, wasn't there? You know, when Cal appeared, and I think he walked into the pub and everybody turned around and looked at him. And having lived in a small village and having experienced that before, I was like, it was so vivid. She brought it to life.
it's stuff like that, Sharon. Like, like the classic one is the old Western when the stranger comes into town and the
Yes,
piano
yeah,
stops,
definitely.
right? Like that,
Yeah.
that's hackneyed, right? That's cliche. That's embedded in our imaginations. So
Yeah.
when you put that across, when it comes to your turn to do something like this, you're always striving to try and put your own original spin, but while also trying to get the reader to grasp just how what kind of situation this is. And I completely agree.
Yeah.
Completely well done.
But
Expert.
This was I hadn't read her first one, so I just now learned about Cal Lovett and the fact that he was basically had a true crime podcast and was solving crimes for people via that. And I was quite fascinated by that idea. Does anybody want to say anything about that? Because it's
yeah,
quite a different way of dealing with a crime story.
I think that was a hook for me because you mentioned Matt Wesolowski's books, the Six Stories series, and I love that series. I really do love that series. And I thought, oh no, please don't let this just be a copy of Matt's books. But it wasn't, it was completely different. So it almost felt like it wasn't a police procedural, but it was that sort of, traditional
Yeah,
crime mystery going on, and the backstory of Cal and his sister, what happened to his sister and his search for justice, alongside him helping other people throughout that. So I thought that worked really, really well. And I was so glad it wasn't just another podcaster and done in that format, because I thought sometimes you get it's almost as if you're reading the script of the podcast, but
Yes, yeah, no,
this
it wasn't
wasn't.
like that at
Yeah.
all. It was more like, the old idea of a private investigator.
Mm,
So many crime books where had a private investigator, almost Hercule Poirot in a way that,
yeah.
he would turn up and sort of find out everything about everybody,
But
although he wasn't.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
Brian,
I quite like the podcast. I quite like the podcast element of it because obviously it's hyper contemporary, right?
yes,
And
yeah,
I'm a big fan of when you get your classic crime tropes brought absolutely bang up to date to the year that they're published or the year that they're set or what have you, like I like that. I like that. Obviously it's not the only. Sharon, you've mentioned another series, obviously, with the kind of podcast is at the heart of it. But I like I like that it's becoming now a thing because we all listen to podcasts, right? We're all on
yeah,
podcasts, we all talk
definitely.
about podcasts. It's part of everyday life now, and seeing it moving in, and it has been for the last couple of years, of course. But I like it. Still feels special, right? It still feels special to get that. It still feels like a fresh hook. Exactly as you said,
mm,
Sharon. That it's all right. It's a podcaster that's doing the investigation this time, as opposed to another cop or another,
Yeah.
yeah.
Because it
Belgian
sort of
detective.
feels personal, as if it's you.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, like you're the one doing the investigation, as it were, that you're the
absolutely.
person, because you don't
Yeah.
have to be qualified in any way. You're not part of the system. Yeah.
But
Uh,
Brian, you touched on it, Jonathan, and you touched on it as well, Alex. My heart actually broke for her.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
pressure to be, she talked about social media and the Facebook bitches at the school gate, all the perfect mums,
yeah,
and that pressure to actually be that person.
yeah,
It was a heartbreaking story, and right from the beginning,
yeah.
I knew it was going to be a heartbreaking story
Yeah.
because
yeah.
of what happened.
And what about I mean, don't like to ask, did you work out who it was or what had
Kind
actually
I
happened?
did,
Because I thought it was, yeah,
I did a
I
bit,
thought
yeah.
it was all very well, put together, I thought, in that
But it didn't
respect.
spoil it. Sometimes
No,
I think work it
no,
doesn't
and
doesn't spoil it at all.
no,
It's
yeah.
I still got that rush and that buzz at the
Oh,
end of the
I mean,
book.
yeah, and I would still say there was a good strong element of surprise, but you could suddenly see, oh, it's like getting that last bit of the jigsaw.
Yeah, it just all sort
And
of
the
falls into
opening was
place.
so wonderful. You suddenly understood what all that opening was. I really like that very much. So anything else you want to say, Alex?
No, I think we've covered it really, but I just like to say a bit about the debut prize really, because I think that if the audience don't primarily use the debut prize as a guide, I would, because that's how I generally I know that the debut prize and the Machiavelli prize is going to be a good guide as to what will be in the awards for the following year, because there's always a couple, and I just think that keep your eye on the debut prize, because there's some really interesting books. Because I've just read Robbie Morrison's second one, which he won the debut prize a couple of years ago as well.
Yeah. Well, you just did a great advert for bloody Scotland there and its prizes.
Yeah,
I didn't
absolutely
even prompt you.
They'll all advertise bloody Scotland.
Yes. Well, I thank you again. We're just drawing to an end now, and what I need to warn you all about our next Bloody Scotland book club, which will be on the 26th of June, which is a Wednesday, and it will be with Gordon Brown. So he'll look after you well. We don't know the actual books yet, but that will be announced on the Bloody Scotland webpage and your newsletter and all the rest of it. That they'll be up there. So we'll look forward to our next one. So I want to say a big thank you. There were some lovely comments popped up on our screen, and we were delighted to see how much people were enjoying it. There was someone on, I think, from the States the first time they'd found it, so they were very pleased. So a big thank you to our team, Alex and Jonathan and Sharon, and hope to see you again soon.
And to you, Lynn.
You two out there. And okay, bye-bye.